Wow.
That was great. That was great. Hey, Vinny, well, first off, welcome to a second look with Vinnie and Jake. But Vinny, first off, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Jake. As always, sir.
Nice. And you know what? Can you tell us about that song and who recorded? What's the title? And what's it? What grade level would it be for? And so forth.
That band is Iron Maiden, Jake, from the Somewhere in Time album, 1986. And the name of that song is Alexander the Great. And we chose that song for this episode because we're going to be looking at the 6th grade ancient history curriculum when we're talking about our subject of tonight. And the period of time comes just before Alexander the Great pops up on the scene.
Should we go ahead and put the lyrics up at the end for our citations this time?
Yes. Yeah, we can do that. Do we want to do a read of the lyrics or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and read it real quick. Let me go ahead and share the screen with our audience.
All right.
And there you go. Why don't you read that for us, Vinny?
So it starts off with the guy's talking. My son, ask for thyself another kingdom, for that which I leave is too small for thee. And that's quoted from Philip of Macedonia, 339 BC. And so the song has a really long intro, and when it finally gets into it, it really kind of reads almost like an outline of a unit, right, or a history lesson. So near to the east, in a part of ancient Greece, in an ancient land called Macedonia, was born a son to Philip of Macedon. The legend, his name was Alexander. At the age of 19, he became the Macedon king, and he swore to free all of Asia Minor by the Aegean Sea. In 334 BC, he utterly beat the armies of Persia. And then it goes into the chorus of the song. Alexander the Great, his name struck fear into hearts of men. Alexander the Great became a legend amongst mortal men. Next verse. King Darius III fled Persia. The Scythians fell by the river Jaxartes. Then Egypt fell to the Macedon king as well. And he founded the city called Alexandria by the Tigris River. He met King Darius again and crushed him again in the battle of Arbela. Entering Babylon and Susa treasures he found. Took Persepolis, the capital of Persia. It repeats the chorus again. The next verse. A Phrygian king had bound a chariot yoke, and Alexander cut the Gordian knot. And legend said that who untied the knot, he would become the master of Asia. And the song does a little change in there, right? It's not the same matching as the earlier verses. Hellenism he spread far and wide. The Macedonian learned mind. Their culture was a Western way of life. He paved the way for Christianity, marching on, the battle weary, marching side by side. Alexander's army, line by line, they wouldn't follow him into India. Tired of the combat, pain, and the glory. Alexander the Great, his name struck fear into hearts of men. Alexander the Great, he died of fever in Babylon. And that's the last verse of the song. So it's kind of interesting how he kind of his life ends, right? And it fits right into he died of fever in Babylon.
Wasn't he like 30-something years old when he died? Or
he was a really young guy who was basically at the top of his game at the time.
Yeah, I mean, he was conquering the world.
Yeah.
Right? Alexander the Great. Wow. But that's not who we're talking about today. But similar, correct?
The big guy right before Alexander.
The big guy, I like that, the big guy before Alexander. So today in a second look, Vinny did some homework. He did some studying. Last couple of weeks, he and I have been talking. Can we say we've been debating a little bit too, maybe? We could say
Absolutely,
that.
Yeah. Sure.
And so we're bringing this to you after long discussions and debate and talk. And Vinny has a claim. Let me go ahead and read this and tell me if I'm correct, Vinny. Cyrus appears on a notable list of the top 100 most influential people in history. It's in a biography.com or internet site, right?
Yes.
He comes in at 87.
Oof.
And my good friend Vinny says he will use this list as a barometer and make the case that Cyrus the Great, can I call him Cyrus the Great? Because I think some people did.
He was actually, yes.
Cyrus the Great does not receive his due respect and should be ranked in the top 10. Or, I'm sorry, the top 10 of the most 100 influential people in history. Wow. So you're going to argue that he should be top 10, not number 87.
Yeah,
so,
number 87, yeah. When I first saw that air on TV, I knew in my bones, okay, Cyrus is going to have to be there somewhere, right?
Can I share what the top 10 is? I mean, is that okay?
Sure, yeah. Why don't we give him the top 10 real quick?
Yeah, because that just blows my mind that you're right. Why isn't he further up? But this is, I'll go 10 up. They have number 10, Louis Pasteur. Okay.
Pasteurized milk, right?
Pasteurized milk. Number 9, Jesus. Excuse me?
Wow, number 9.
9?
Woo!
I mean, yeah, okay. I'm not going to say anymore. Albert Einstein at number 8. He was ranked the number, I think it was Life magazine, or was it Time, ranked him as number 1 in the millennium, right? Last millennium. Oh, okay. He was number 1. That was that magazine. Every magazine has their own little list, right? Shakespeare at number 7. Okay, okay. George Washington at number 6. Cyrus, actually, that's
we put him in.
That's you put Cyrus at number 5.
Actually, you know what? You're reading from my final. Yeah.
Oh, I'm reading at your final 10.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have the top 10 of the original list? I don't have it.
Yeah.
I don't think.
It's not in order, but I broke it down in those categories.
But these were in there though, right?
Yes.
They have Muhammad and they have
Muhammad's number 1. Isaac Newton was number 2.
And Confucius number 3, and then
I think Jesus is number 4.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, but still,
and then Buddha's in there.
And in your opinion, Cyrus is number 5.
Right.
So you only have my top 5, not top 10.
Well. So right? I'm going to put him somewhere in the top 10, but I got to do it legitimately, right? So I got to do it kind of based on the list too.
Yeah.
But, they don't have their first. They don't have. There's 7 categories of people on that list.
Sure. And what a hard thing to do, huh? Isn't that difficult?
It is. And the guy that did it, his name doesn't come to mind right now, but he's in the link is in the show notes.
Okay.
And so he wrote a book, and a lot of people acclaimed it because he was a kind of a jack of all trades, and they thought his objectivity showed through. And then in the late 1990s, they revised the list.
Probably more people were involved, and to get their little inputs.
So that's
right?
what we're looking at.
So Vinny, so tell us, why should it be ranked in the top 10 according to you, Vinny?
Well, Cyrus the Great was the founder of the Persian Achaemenid dynasty around 550 or so BCE. And of course, in the 6th grade curriculum, covers it pretty well. The biggest empire the world had ever seen at the time, stretching from the Indus River all the way clear over to the Mediterranean, Asia Minor with modern-day Turkey, and down through Egypt as well. So like a huge, massive empire. And that's when Alexander the Great is going to be the one who finishes the Persian Empire, and that's when the Macedonian Empire takes over, right? The Hellenistic world. So let's we'll do a quick review of Cyrus on the ground, right?
Yes, do that.
Just his achievements on the ground were like pretty amazing. So he's Cyrus the Great for throughout history, he's been kind of recognized as a tolerant king. So his first move was not to conquer everybody, right? His first move was to approach and do some negotiation. Now, if somebody didn't want to play ball, he did create the 10,000 Immortals, which was that's the army unit. Every time one dies, another one takes his place, right? That's why they call it the 10,000 Immortals. If anybody out there saw the movie 300, that's
based
10,000,
on that,
right? It's based on that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So his strategy was to pretty much negotiate with the people, and then as he's setting up the empire, he's going to actually recruit the leaders from each of these kingdoms. So by the time his son's in Egypt, right? Cyrus is actually going to die before Egypt is officially incorporated, but and that's going to be his son that takes Egypt. But he's going to spread, it's like 22 different kingdoms, right? Spread out through this massive land base, right? I mean, from, again, Indus River all the way to the Mediterranean. So how are you going to rule 22 different kingdoms? Well, what he does is he sets up a regional governorship, right? It's called a satrap, okay? And so 22 of these, and so he's going to recruit from each of the city-states that he's taken over a military leader, the general for the military, If he can, he'll take the lead guy to fill the governor role. And then there's another important position as a record keeper that in the sources, some people have likened this to a Secretary of State position, right? So the guy that's just doing all the recording and writing everything down. So another key policy of Cyrus, he was one step beyond religious tolerant, right? Okay. He incorporated these kingdoms, their patron gods, kind of like into the empire. So when he made his Cyrus cylinder seal from Babylon, when he goes to Babylon, they ordain him as his king through Marduk, right, their god. Again, in the Hebrew Old Testament, he's seen through Yahweh as the God of the Jews. We also have scripture text from Egypt. His son does the same thing. So his policy-wide is beyond better than religious tolerant, right? So, and he's letting the everyday lives of the people continue, pretty much for the most part, which really, really smart, and of course unheard of up until this point in time. I mean, everyone's conquering and coming down hard on people. He's taking a different approach. This really sets a precedent, and we'll see why he's so influential later on as well. So at the same time, he sets up a roads, right, throughout the kingdom, and what we would consider a mail delivery service, right? Post office, right? So he has these different posts that are set up on all the roads he creates that are connecting all the satraps, right? And so you have the guys that are galloping on their horses. They leave one post, they go to the next post. The people, the horses are waiting there, and men are waiting there to take that message on. And so he has all those outposts. So he's
kind of his way to connect the whole kingdom, right? I mean,
and he one more very, very important thing that connected everybody. He had one single universal language, which was Aramaic. So that was the official language of business. So he had one language, all the roads. He also had a coinage system that he set up, right? So this guy is setting up what we can just from listening to it, right? A really great empire here that is not based on rule for like a tyrannic king or somebody who's doesn't have no mercy or anything. This guy is he's tolerant. He's everyone respects him for this, right? Because for example, he took Babylon without pretty much any bloodshed, right? Babylon, the monster empire at the time, right? Because the people of Babylon didn't like their king. And so he made a deal with a few people there, and they just deposed the king. And that's happened in a couple of other places too. Now, there was a couple of places where he had to go full on and, battle. But, that was kind of like a last resort, I guess you could say. Okay. So all those things connecting this whole empire, really, really big deal. And let me make sure I didn't miss.
So that's the history of him, and see if you missed anything. But
right, and that's basically what you're going to run into. In your sixth grade curriculum, King Croesus is mentioned because he's the guy that has all the gold up in Asia Minor, and when he beats him, he takes all of his gold. So that's why he's able to create that coinage system.
Pretty strategic with that, yeah, very strategic.
And so and also one other thing that he's kind of famous for, right? Today we would consider it maybe like a national park. Mm-hmm. But he set up these botanical gardens that had flowing waterways, the hanging gardens of Babylon, right? That's Cyrus, right? Oh, wow. Flowing waterways, channels, flower and fruit-bearing trees from all around the empires. Oh, wow. So a very aesthetic type of thing going on as well. So nice. There's a couple of other engineering things that he did, but for the most part, and this is, remember, he's going to die about 530. So he takes Babylon about 550. So he's only around for another 20 years after he takes Babylon. And but in the meantime, all this is being set up. And the Persian Empire lasts about 200 years before Alexander the Great comes along. So that's basically a review of him on the ground.
Right. It's good to say that Alexander the Great studied him. I mean, to be able to do what he did.
Well, now we're going to talk about our first source.
Yeah, let's do the first argument that.
So the first source is a textual source. It's called the Cyropaedia. It was written by a Greek. He's a historian, a general. The guy studied under Socrates, Xenophon, and modern scholars kind of think there might be a little bit of propaganda involved in this piece, because what it portrays is how you run an empire, right? How you run and how Cyrus did it as a model king. Now, I would suggest that there's not a whole lot of propaganda going on. The guy obviously implemented some major things that made his kingdom run smooth, and would reflect on him very well as far as historians go. Herodotus is another one who talks about it. So all the sources kind of agree that, hey, Cyrus was a pretty good guy. So Cyropaedia, right, is a key document because it's said that Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, both had a copy on them, and they read it, and it was like one of their favorites, right? So we're talking some big guns that are already reading, right? And then of course it's going to get lost like a lot of other things did, right? But it will resurface during the Renaissance period when a lot of ancient sources started resurfacing. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Cyropaedia is going to be read. There's, I think, about 8 or 10 people on the list of the top 100 that read it. Every major philosopher, scientist, Thomas Jefferson, right, one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, had 2 copies of Cyropaedia, right? And it influenced him and other founding fathers big time. And I have a source on that connection. And let me just read the title of that. It'll be in the show notes. We're not going to talk about it in depth or anything, but the title of it is Jefferson and Cyrus: How the Founding Fathers of America, in their own words, were inspired by Cyrus the Great. And that's a 48-page research paper that comes out of was it Harvard? It was Harvard or one of those big colleges. I think it's Harvard.
Okay.
But that source is in the
notes in the end.
So okay. Cyrus the Great is, everyone's reading Machiavelli, right?
Prince, yeah.
So he writes and there's a genre of writing. It's called it's called Mirror of Princes. So it's either like a how to do or not how to do.
Right.
To be a leader. And so this is how they're teaching like all their kings and princes and people that are coming up, right? So Cyropaedia was a huge influence on Machiavelli, who wrote one of the most popular of these writings based on Cyropaedia. Okay. And then I also added in the show notes, there's Business Insider. It's a pretty popular website, magazine too as well, right?
Right.
There's an article that I linked in there. 14 lessons learned from the ancient times, right?
Okay.
Coming out of Cyropaedia. So we have this, and I'm not reading from the text. This is the only text I'm not going to read from. There's 2 other. But the point being is that this text of how is describing how Cyrus ruled his kingdom is extremely popular, right? In his time until it's lost, and then beginning in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, founding fathers, and all the way up. I'm going to show with the next text source all the way up through to today, right? Okay. And I'm not talking about the article either. We're gonna talk about the Cyrus cylinder seal, right?
So right now, ending with this first piece, we're just seeing that how influential it was to people like Alexander the Great and to Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, people who read this and probably were influencing when they're writing their documents, like the Constitution, like the state constitutions.
Let's think about it. Religious tolerance. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is the First Amendment, right? Cyrus
is big on that, right? So
yeah, it's a major part of it.
He let people keep the religions. Like I think you shared that, right? I mean, that's pretty incredible. And
it's probably because of the religion he practiced, which we're going to touch on a little bit in the towards the end, right? But that's probably had a big influence.
Let's move to the second piece then, brother.
Okay, so the Cyrus cylinder seal. Okay, this was discovered in 1880 something, I believe. Of course, the Brits just grabbed it, right? And it was the British Museum has they have a lot of art. Now today, just today, right? I was watching a lecture from the Met in New York, and it was on the Cyrus cylinder seal. And so when they were explaining all the bona fides and the credentials, and they work with the Iranian authorities now.
Can you explain what the Cyrus the cylinder is?
So the Cyrus cylinder is like a barrel. I thought I sent you a picture, but that's okay. We don't have to put it up.
No, you did, but for the audience.
Okay, so it's a barrel-shaped piece of hard clay, and it has cuneiform text on it, right? Now there's chunks of it missing. I think there's only like maybe a third of it that's
hundreds of years of
right. But yeah, I mean the thing is like let's see, 500 BCE. So let's 500 and another. It's a long time.
500, yeah.
2,500 years. Yeah, it's a long time. So on the cylinder seals, important. Many modern scholars, not all of them, right, but many of them kind of identify it as the first human rights document, because in it it's stated very clearly Cyrus's policy of religious tolerance, and as I say, one step above religious tolerance. So I'm going to read a passage from the Cylinder Sale real quick. So Marduk, the great lord who nurtures his people, saw with pleasure Cyrus' fine deeds and true heart, and ordered that Cyrus go to Babylon. He had Cyrus take the road to Tintir, and like a friend and companion walked at his side. Cyrus' vast troops, whose number, like the water in a river, could not be counted, marched fully armed at his side. Marduk had Cyrus enter Shuana without fighting or battle. He saved Babylon from hardship. He handed over to Cyrus Nabonidus, the king who did not fear him. All the people of Tintir, Sumer, and Akkad, nobles and governors, bowed down before Cyrus and kissed his feet, rejoicing over his kingship, and their faces shone. The Lord, through whose trust all were rescued from death, and who saved them from all distress and hardship. They blessed him sweetly and praised his name. Amid jubilation and rejoicing, I entered Babylon in peace to establish a just government and strive for peace. My troops wandered peacefully throughout Babylon. In all of Sumer and Akkad, I gave no cause for fear, and no one was terrorized. I concerned myself with the needs and welfare of the citizens of Babylon, Sumer, and Akkad, and with promoting their well-being. I freed them from their improper oppression and bondage. I healed their afflictions and put an end to their misfortune. I restored their dilapidated dwellings. I gathered and assisted the displaced, held in bondage, to return to their homes. I rebuilt sanctuaries and chapels that lay in ruins. The deities of Sumer and Akkad and Nabonidus had, to the fury of the people, brought to Shuana. I returned the unharmed to the rightful sanctuaries. I have returned all the deities to their sanctuaries and restored their temples. So
wow, he had pretty good self-confidence in him.
he did, and it's kind of it's very straightforward, right?
You have to be when you're king, yeah.
Right, and we don't have to do too much explaining to the audience. No. This is the policy that was throughout the kingdom, right? And we're gonna prove that from the biblical perspective as well. So we're gonna go to our next source, right?
Okay.
And this is the really cool thing about the next source. It's the book of Isaiah, right, from the Hebrew Old Scriptures, Old Testament. And what's really neat and archaeologists and historians always love is when there's text that's outside of the Bible that confirms what's inside the Bible, right? That's
and vice versa too, right?
And vice versa. So it gives us a greater perspective on these things, right?
For sure.
So I'm going to read some passages from Isaiah 44 and 45. Mm-hmm. And all of this stuff, links are in the show notes for all the textual sources. I have the English translations for the Cyropaedia and for the Cylinder Seal. All of it complete. So all that stuff's in the show notes.
We'll give it to them, yeah.
So 24, chapter 44, verse 24. Thus saith Yahweh, your Redeemer, and he who formed you from the womb. I am Yahweh, who makes all things, who stretches forth the heavens alone, who spreads abroad the earth by myself, who frustrates the signs of the liars and makes diviners mad, who turns wise men backward and makes their knowledge foolish, who confirms the word of his servant and performs the counsel of his messengers, who says of Jerusalem, she shall be inhabited, and the cities of Judah, they shall be built, and I will raise up the decayed places thereof. Who says to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up the rivers. Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and I shall perform all my pleasure, even saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple your foundation shall be laid. And then the next chapter starts at 45. Thus saith Yahweh to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open the doors before him, and the gates shall not be shut. I will go before you, and make the rough places smooth. I will break in pieces the doors of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron. And I will give you the treasures of darkness, and hidden riches of secret places, that you may know that it is I, Yahweh, who call you by your name, even the God of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my chosen, I have called you by your name. I have surnamed you, though you have not known me. I am Yahweh, and there is no one else besides me. There is no God. I will gird you. Through you, though you have not known me. And then, thus saith Yahweh, the Holy of Israel and his Maker. Ask me of the things that are to come, concerning my sons, and concerning the work of my hands, command you me. I have made the earth and created man on it. And I, even my hands, have stretched out the heavens, and all their hosts have I commanded. I have raised him up in righteousness, and I will make straight all his ways. He shall build my city, and he shall let my exiles go free, not for price, no reward, says Yahweh of hosts. And of course, he's talking about Cyrus the Great.
Right. Can I just say something while you're reading it? It in my head, I'm being honest with you, I'm kind of moved by the piece for a couple reasons. But one reason is I'm like, it is amazing that Yahweh, God of the Old Testament, and I would even say Christians in New Testament would say, it's amazing. So one of the first times where God goes outside his people, picks a man to say, you're an anointed here. Some people would say Messiah, but I would say it's more of anointed, right? It's being picked.
Anointed meaning just a king. Anointed
king,
as a king's
right.
commission, right?
So
he's coronated.
So he's being picked, and God probably knew what kind of character Cyrus. I'm sure he did. He's God.
You would have
picked
to
him, right? And I'm sure the Jews were going crazy, like thinking, "Who is this guy? What's this all about?" And Yahweh says, "Hey, this is how it's going to happen," and he does it. And Cyrus does, and we see historically, right? And I'm going on your shoes now, but I was just kind of moved, like, wow, God picked this guy. It's kind of cool. But go ahead and finish it. I'm sorry.
And to your point, it's the same thing that's read on the cylinder seal, right? Marduk, by his right hand, picked Cyrus. Mm-hmm. So this is Cyrus's policies working through each perspective of each kingdom and their particular God, right? Because let's just make it clear, right? In the Old Testament, right, in the ancient Israelites, Yahweh was their God of their people, right? And so we understand like monotheistic being in the sense of they only worshiped one God, but just it's all over the Bible in the Old Testament, right? Sure. There's other gods. Their God is considered the better
one God, Yahweh. Yeah.
Right. So that was right. So this is exactly what the cylinder seal said. What happened in Babylon? Well, we also have written in Egypt, right? He's sending everybody back. Let's make this clear, right? The return of the Jews from their Babylonian exile, major point of history for the Jewish people. If this doesn't happen, if Cyrus is not doing this at this time, the Babylonians
they're wiped out.
The Babylonians wiped them out. The Davidic kingship, the temple gone, taking all their stuff. I mean, Cyrus returns them. He's mentioned about 19, 20 times in the Bible. Other Persian kings are mentioned because it's very important that he commissions the rebuilding of their temple as well. So he's paying for the rebuilding of the temple, right? And this is the period, the phase is called Second Temple of Judaism. And it's this is when the Jews are writing most of the Bible, putting things together. You know, they had some stuff written before, but this is the major part where they're putting all this stuff together, right? Putting a text together and what have you. So we can say, without doubt, I believe, that if not for Cyrus, we might not have Old Testament scriptures. And if we don't have Old Testament scriptures, we might not have any New Testament scriptures in Christianity, right? Because Christianity is comes off of Judaism. So
now I would share my little not bias, but my theology a little bit. I would think God, Yahweh, would pick someone else to do it. However, he didn't. He picked Cyrus, and that's powerful. I mean, and I think what you're saying is, I mean, wow, he did. And without Cyrus, at least in our eyes here, Jews would be gone. They'd be done.
Yeah, they were, right? And freeing them and letting them take all their temple artifacts and everything back. It was major, and historically, when we think of Western civilization, right, and the Judeo-Christian traditions that flow through what we consider Western civilization, I mean, that's the root of Western civilization. And if Cyrus doesn't do what he does, then maybe somebody else comes along and helps him out, and maybe history kind of went the same way. I personally don't think so. I think that Cyrus, because he was such a great ruler and king, maybe one God, maybe whoever picked him to do what he was doing, he did a damn good job, and the Jews were damn happy about it, right? And that's why that's why
I get you.
Right. So
right. I think you made your point. Good. So let's get on with it. So we do we have any other points, or is that our last?
So
that's a big point. That's a humongous point.
That's a big point. And so I just want to reiterate from the perspective of Cyrus, right, and the history of the Jews and Judaism.
Yeah.
Freeing them from their Babylonian captivity, commissioning their temple, and then the continued the universal language, Aramaic, which Jesus was speaking Aramaic. We consider at the time, right? because that was the universal language that was put into the.
It's interesting
empire.
how in time language has changed, and then Latin, and then now English, and for
so
sure.
So we just have to consider that the Persians are going to own everything there for about 200 years. So each court, the royal court, and like some of their customs and traditions are adopted, by the different, and they're gonna influence the Romans, who are going to be their major enemies, like a little bit later on in a couple of different Persian empires, right? But the last little point we want to make is I want to talk about Zoroastrianism. Okay, and actually Zoroaster is on that 100 influential list. He's like way back at like a number
like Zoroastrian, the religion.
But yeah, so Zoroaster, they're not exactly sure. He might have been around like way back before Cyrus, or he might have been contemporary. Their texts are kind of a little confusing.
Sure.
I'm going to read, but what's important is that, and of course we can't confirm 100. For Darius we can. Mm-hmm. For Cyrus, scholars can't confirm 100% that he was a follower of Zoroastrianism, but all the tenets follow based on the way he was ruling, right? So I'm just going to read straight from from a source from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay.
Right.
Let's see where I want to start here. And I don't agree with everything in here, but I'm just going to read it as it appears in here. Okay. So though Zoroastrianism was never, even in the thinking of its founder, as insistently monotheistic as, for instance, Judaism or Islam, it does represent an original attempt at unifying under the worship of one supreme God, a polytheistic religion comparable to those of the ancient Greeks, Latins, Indians, and other peoples. Its other salient feature, namely dualism, was never understood in an absolute, rigorous fashion. Good and evil fight an unequal battle in which the former is assured of triumph. God's omnipotence is thus only temporarily limited. In this struggle, all human beings must enlist because of their capacity for free choice. They do so with soul and body, not against the body, for the opposition between good and evil is not the same as the one between spirit and matter. Contrary to the Christian or Manichaean, for Manichaean, a Hellenistic dualistic religion founded by an Iranian prophet Mani, who's also on the list, attitude, fasting, and celibacy are prescribed except as part of the purificatory ritual. The human struggle has a negative aspect nonetheless, in that it must strive for purity and avoid defilement by the forces of death, contact with dead matter, etc. Thus, Zoroastrian ethics, though in itself lofty and rational, has a ritual aspect that is all-pervading. And according to the Zoroastrian tradition, Zoroaster had a divine vision of a supreme being while partaking in a pagan purification rite at age 30. Zoroaster began teaching followers to worship a single god called Ahura Mazda, which is translated as Wise One. He ruled by the Zoroastrian law of Asha, which is truth and righteousness, but didn't impose Zoroastrianism on the peoples of Persia's conquered territories. And some scholars say that the tenets of Zoroastrianism helped to shape the major Abrahamic religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, through the influence of the Persian Empire. And so that's Encyclopedia Britannica. So, and Zoroastrianism continues. Maybe some people never heard of Zoroastrianism. It is a world religion. It continues today. Sure. Freddie Mercury, lead singer of Queen, right? Followed the Zoroastrian religion, and
I read Freddie.
I love Freddie. I love Queen. And as a matter of fact, a Zoroastrian priest is said to have presided over his funeral. So,
I didn't know that. Oh, cool.
Yeah, and their temple is like a fire related. Like the fire is always burning in their temples.
So let's go back. I'm gonna be honest with you. Okay. Your claim is that Cyrus the Great is top 5. After looking, you were kind of appalled when you saw this, and when you told me, I was kind of blown away too. I wasn't sure if he's top 10, like you're saying, but you definitely came A game today. You blew me away. I mean, you shared that I didn't know that Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin were influenced by him. I knew Alexander the Great was, because he used it. The way he handled things, it was, he was influenced by Cyrus for sure.
Right. Obviously, yeah. And
then, of course, the whole piece regarding being influenced. With the Old Testament, with Isaiah. Later on, they talk about the Messiah, in chapter 53, right? But in the chapters you were sharing, we see that Yahweh chose this gentleman, and he's already being talked about, right, by historians. And so the history and the Bible are going hand in hand here, and I thought that was great. And and how Cyrus had such a big influence on the Jews. Without him, at least without God choosing him, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And then so looking at all that, I just can't imagine. Now, then you went to the religion,
Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrian. Lost my train of thought. I thought that was fine, but I think you already won me over.
Okay.
Without even going there, you already won me over. But then you went there, and that's a little bit more fluid because we're not sure about the dates of it and how it started. At the same time, to say it hasn't been influential, that would be incorrect because I mean people like Freddie Mercury, like you shared, and by a lot of people who have been influenced by it. So to say it isn't influential, no, I mean you're right. I mean you got me there too. But
can I give an anecdote, historical one, real quick? So those that are our age, and we don't have to necessarily claim our age right here, right now, right? But for those of us who saw or know the movie The Warriors, right? Michael Beck. It's kind of an old late '70s movie. Warriors come out to play.
Remember that?
Right.
Oh,
I love that movie. Okay. And for those of you who I want to watch it again too, as a matter of fact, just because of this, right? But for those of you who
The Warriors.
So The Warriors. So in the beginning of the movie, everyone will call who's seen it. If you haven't, I'm not going to blow anything. This one leader of a gang in New York has called a truce of all the gangs in New York, and so they're all gathered, right, to listen to him talk. And he's going to do his best attempt to unite all the gangs under one banner. So to make it in his speech, it's really good speech, right? He wants everyone to unite so they can go against the police and fight against the system, and the man and the whole idea of the gangs there, right? Well, he's assassinated, okay, and with the one gang that assassinates him, right, blames it on the Warriors, right? So the Warriors have to gangbang their way all the way back to their territory, try to get this tag of the being blamed for his murder, right, off of them, and that's how the movie goes. The leader who was talking, his name was Cyrus, right, and his name is Cyrus for a reason, because he's trying to gather all of these different gangs of New York under one banner, and that's why in the movie they named their character. That is Cyrus.
So cool. That's
so
cool.
I think that's pretty cool.
Just
right?
That makes it. Just with that point you made. No, I'm just kidding. That's a cool anecdote, though. That's awesome.
Do you want to talk about really quick, or do how I factored in where I put Cyrus in the list and how I
go ahead and do that. You have a short little time. I'm gonna give you.
Okay, so just so everybody's for those of you concerned out there, I looked at the whole list of the top 100. Okay, and I divided it into 7 different categories. There's religious leaders, warrior kings, emperors, scientists, inventors, and there's a few more categories, right? And then I separated those out. There's 7 of them. So I said, okay, I'm going to take the top 2 that this guy has for each, right? And I'm going to make a new list. I'm going to make a top 1 through 16. Okay, I'm going to take 2 from each, but I took 4 from the scientists list because there's twice as many scientists on this list of the top 100 than any other category, right?
Sure.
So so I took the top 2 of each one that he had, right? And so for the warrior king, that's where I put Cyrus in. And the next warrior king that they have is the one of the founders of the Chinese dynasty and Huang dynasty, right? Mm. So the way I numbered them, right? I looked at the same order as the names appeared. So the first one was a religious leader. The next one was a scientist. Okay. Then it was an inventor. Then it was this category and this category. So that's how I used to place these names in a list. So would you like to disclose the list that you were looking at before, or would you like? I'll let you to do it. So this is the top 16 of my revamped list, right? That puts Cyrus. Well, you see what number he falls in.
So we'll go number 16, Galileo. 15, Beethoven. 14, Oliver Cromwell. 13, Shi Huangti. 12, Johann Gutenberg. 11, Aristotle. 10, Louis Pasteur. 9, Jesus. 8, Albert Einstein. 7, Shakespeare. 6, George Washington. 5, Cyrus the Great. Number 5. 4, I always say this wrong name. Tsai Ai-lun. 3, Confucius. 2, Isaac Newton. And number 1, Muhammad.
And Jake, just feel ease of heart. The only reason why Jesus is at number 9 is because the religious leader was first, right? So I had to lead off with number 1. and go through the 7 categories, and then the next top religious leader.
We'll talk later why Jesus was not number 1, but all right.
So that's why
my bias there, but it's a good bias for me.
But that's to explain that.
Thank you for doing that, and you explain why you put this top 16. We're going to put all this information at the bottom of this video, you guys. There's a lot of information this time, and I want to thank you, Vinny, for you brought it on, man. You've been working on this for a couple weeks. You and I have probably talked almost every day, and I've had some issues, some personal issues, and so but you've been there, man. And I want the audience to know this guy is working hard for this show, and we can't wait to come up with another episode for you. We're gonna take a second look at another piece of history.
Can we give him a teaser? Can you give him a little teaser?
Yeah, give a little teaser.
Tiny little teaser.
Yeah.
We're gonna discuss the greatest battle that nobody's ever heard of in history.
That's awesome teaser. We're gonna leave it there. Awesome teaser. Hey, thank you all for being with Vinny and Jake, and for our second episode. And we'll see you for our third episode coming up soon. But thank you. Have a good night.
Goodbye, y'all. See you, Jake.
Yeah.